regained my sight by a miracle after 5 long years of blindness. I decided to keep it a secret, but when I got home, what I saw my husband doing shattered my heart into pieces. Hi, everyone. Before I continue with my story, I have something exciting to share. You can now join my YouTube channel membership. As a member, you'll get exclusive videos, behind-the-scenes moments, special badges next to your name, and early access to my newest stories before anyone else. It's my way of thanking you for all your support. Just click the join button below this video, and let's grow our YouTube family together. Now, let's get back to my story. My name is Isabella Warren, and I'm 38 years old. 5 years ago, my life was plunged into permanent darkness. A rare optic nerve disease, one that even the finest specialists in Boston and New York couldn't fix, took away my sight. The last image I remember before losing my vision is of my husband, Daniel Warren, holding my trembling hands in the hospital room. His face was close to mine, his voice steady as he promised, "I'll be your eyes in the dark, Izzy, always." Back then, I clung to that promise like a lifeline. For a while, Daniel lived up to every word. He was my anchor in the storm, guiding me through unfamiliar spaces, reading to me at night, and helping me choose my clothes in the mornings. Even the smallest gestures, like describing the sunset over our Cape Cod vacation home, made me feel as though I hadn't lost everything. Daniel took over every part of my life. My late father's real estate empire, billion-dollar legacy spread across the Northeast, had suddenly become his responsibility. He handled meetings, signed contracts, negotiated deals, all while assuring me he was simply protecting what your father built. Izzy, I trusted him with my eyes closed. Literally, in those early years, I adapted as best as I could. I learned to navigate our townhouse by memory. I memorized the sound and feel of my favorite teacups, the scent of my favorite shawl, the subtle creak of the third step on our staircase. But the truth is, the world without sight is an endless maze, even when you know the layout. Some nights, when loneliness pressed too hard, I would sit by the window in our living room, fingers resting on the sill, imagining what the city skyline looked like at that exact moment. Daniel would sit beside me, holding my hand, describing every building, every glimmer of light reflecting off the Charles River. He made me believe I was still part of the picture. That's why I never questioned the depth of his loyalty. Why would I? The man had been there when my world collapsed. He was the one steady figure in the blur of my new reality. For a long time, I told myself I was lucky to have a husband who loved me enough to carry me through the darkness. Lucky to have someone who didn't walk away when the glamour and ease of our old life faded into something much harder. But even in the deepest dark, there are things you can censor, shift in tone, a new rhythm in the house, the faint scent of something unfamiliar. I didn't know it then, but the shadows in my life weren't all caused by my blindness. Some were standing right there in the room with me. In the years after I went blind, Daniel became more than just my husband. He was my guide, my secretary, my driver, my business manager, and, in many ways, my shield from the outside world. I depended on him for everything, not just because I couldn't see, but because he made it seem like I shouldn't deal with certain things. When calls came in from my lawyers or investors, Daniel would say, "I'll handle it. Izzy, you just focus on getting better." When friends invited me out for lunch, he'd say, "Babe, the city's too busy, and I don't want you getting hurt. I'll bring them over here instead." It sounded caring at first, protective. But over time, the bubble around me began to feel smaller and smaller. Still, I brushed away any doubts. After all, my father had trusted him enough to make him the executive of my estate before he passed, and Daniel never complained. He kept the house running, made sure my medications were organized, and even brought flowers to my bedside on random mornings. To the outside world, he was the picture of devotion. We fell into a routine that felt safe. Every morning, he'd kiss my forehead before heading to his meetings. In the evenings, he'd describe his day in detail, every person he met, every deal he closed, the places he had lunch. I would listen, smiling, picturing it all in my mind like a storybook. But slowly, little cracks began to appear in the perfect image. It started with whispers I couldn't place. Soft, hushed voices somewhere in the house when Daniel thought I was asleep. Then there were faint, unfamiliar scents, perfume that wasn't mine. A floral sweetness lingering in the air long after Daniel had left the room. Once, I woke up in the middle of the night and heard the faint sound of laughter from the kitchen, a woman's laughter. Light and playful. When I asked Daniel about it the next morning, he chuckled and said, "Babe, you were dreaming. You know, we don't have company this week." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. After all, blindness changes the way you trust. You're forced to take people at their word because you can't confirm anything with your own eyes. And when the person you trust most is your husband, the man who's been your anchor in the storm, questioning him feels like betraying yourself. But the cracks continued to deepen. The whispers and laughter became more frequent. And eventually, I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. But something in Sadim knew there was more to the story. And soon I'd get the first real sign that my perfect world wasn't as perfect as Eth. The first time I realized there was someone else living in my home. It was because of footsteps, not Daniel's. His were heavy and deliberate. This was lighter, almost careful, like a person didn't want to be heard. I'd deep in the living room, listening to the soft hum of the city outside. And there it would be, a faint creak on the third stair, the whisper of bare feet on their hardwood floor. At first, I thought maybe it was the cleaning lady, Dania occasionally hired. But she always greeted me cheerfully when she came. Whoever this was never spoke. Then there was the perfume, sweet but no. It would drift into a room long before I heard footsteps. Once it was so close that I swear I felt someone standing just a few feet away from me. When I turned my head toward sound, there was nothing. No greeting, no movement, just silence. I asked Daniel about it one evening when came home. "Babe, you've been alone all day, right?" I asked carefully, Salod lightly. "Yeah, of course. Why?" He thought I heard someone in the house. "Oh, Izzy," he said with a warm chuckle, kissing my forehead. "You've been reading too many of those suspense audio. It's just your mind playing tricks." His tone was so reassuring, so familiar that I almost believed him almost. But a few nights later, I woke to the sound of muffled giggling down the hall. A woman's voice. This time, I was certain it wasn't my imagination. I sat up in bed, straining to listen, but the sound stopped abruptly. Moments later, I heard Daniel's footsteps entering the bedroom. "You, okay?" he whispered, sliding in toward beside me. "Yeah, just thought I'd heard something," I murmured. He kissed me cheek and pulled me close. "Go back to sleep, Izzy." I did, but not because I was convinced. From that night on, It started paying more attention. Every door click, every laugh that wasn't me, every shift in the air. I didn't know who she was or why she was here, but I could feel her presence as surely as I could feel the warmth of the sun on my face. And even though I couldn't see her, she was already casting a shadow over my life. A month ago, Daniel had taken me to what was supposed to be my last surgery. The doctors had warned Manette to expect miracles. My optic nerve was severe and the odds were stacked against me. When we came home afterward, the results hadn't been. Daniel told me gently, "Baby, I know you wanted different news, but maybe we just have to accept this is how life will be." I remember nodding, swallowing the disappointment like a bitter pill. By then, I had already given up hope of ever seeing again. He still took my medications, partly because the doctor said they'd help with eye health, partly because Daniel. Then one morning, it happened. It started as a faint shimmer in the darkness, like a flicker of lightning bent, closed eyelids. I blinked several times, thinking it was my imagination. But over the next few days, the flickers came more often. Little bursts of light, faint outlines of shapes moving across my vision. At first, I didn't tell Daniel, not because I was sure of what I was seeing, but because something inside him told me to wait to watch. And then came the day I knew I wasn't imagining. I was sitting in the living room when I saw a blurred figure moving in the hallway. Slim, feminine, her hair swaying as she walked. It wasn't Daniel. She paused for a moment as if looking at him, then disappeared down the hall. My heart pounded in my chest. Even though my vision was still hazy, I knew this was the same presence I had been sensing for months. That was when the decision came to me, sharp and clear. I'm not telling anyone, my sight is coming back. If I pretended to still be blind, I could finally see for myself what was happening behind my back, who this woman was, why she was in my home. So, I kept quiet. Every day, my vision sharpened little by little. Outlines became shapes became faces. Color started bleeding back into my world. And with every detail I gained, the truth started to take shape. And it wasn't the truth I wanted to see. The morning ether panned, I had been sitting in my usual spot on the sunroom couch, sipping chamali tea like always. My sight had improved enough now that I could tell where the sunlight streamed through Thettle windows, could see shadows moving. The shapes were no longer just vague. I could make out edges, colors, and sometimes even facial expressions, if I focused hard enough. That's when she came in through the back French doors like she owned the place. No hesitation, no knocking. She was younger than me, much younger, with long honey blonde hair that fell in loose waves down her back. She wore a cream silk blouse tucked into fitted jeans and high heels that clicked against the marble. Her perfume floated ahead of her, a heavy floral scent that filled the. I had smelled it before many times. That same fragrance had lingered in the air long after Daniel left for work meetings. I told myself it was just housekeeper's perfume. I had been. Daniel followed behind her, carrying 2 shopping bags. His face lit with a smile I hadn't seen in years. A smile that wasn't for me. I quickly lowered my head, pretending I was just staring into nothingness, like always. Illit, my eyes go unfocused, just enough for him to believe I couldn't see. "Morning, Izzy," Daniel said casually, walking past me. His tone was warm but brisk, like he was eager to get on with whatever plans they had. "Morning," I answered softly, keeping my voice even. I listened to their footsteps, depuring toward the kitchen. The woman's laugh rang out high and bright like crystal, breaking. I stayed completely still, my hands resting in my lap. But my mind was a raging storm. My sight was good enough now, that when I quietly stood and followed the sound, I could peek around the corner and see. Daniel stood at the counter unboxing pastries from one of my favorite cafes downtown. The woman leaned casually against the granite, sipping from a coffee mug, my mug, the blue ceramic one my father had given meth day. I opened my first office. She reached out, brushed something off Daniel's shirt, and he leaned down and kissed her. Not a quick peck, not an accidental brush. This was slow, intimate, familiar. I bit down so hard on the inside of my cheek that I tasted blood. My fingers curled into my palms. I had imagined before what betrayal might feel like, but nothing could prepare me for this. For watching Demon I trusted with my life, my business, my everything. Press his lips against someone else's with a tenderness he hadn't shown me in years. The ache in my chest wasn't just emotional. It was physical, sharp, like my ribs had cracked from the inside. I wanted Tosgrim to throw something, to demand an explanation, but I didn't. Instead, I quietly slipped back to the sunroom, sat down, and placed my teacup on the table as if I had never moved. A few minutes later, Daniel returned alone. I'm heading out with a client, he said. Won't be back until late. Make sure you eat something, okay? Okay, I murmured, keeping my face perfectly calm. When he left, I heard faint echo of heels on marble again, moving toward the back door. I stood quickly, heart pounding, and peered through the glass just in time to see her climb into the passenger seat of his black Tesla. I stood there long after the car disappeared from the driveway, my hands trembling. Later that night, lying in bed beside him, I stared into the darkness, my mind replaying every second of what I'd seen. Every detail, the way he looked at her, the way her hand rested lightly on his chest, the way his smile widened for her in a way it no longer did for me. It wasn't just a fling. No, this was something deeper, more deliberate. And I realized if I confronted him now, I'd get these, maybe even tears, but no truth. He'd find a way to hide things better, to push me further into isolation. I needed proof, not just for my own heart, but for what I suspected was happening with my finances, my health, and my future. The next morning, I started carrying my phone with me. It had a decent camera, and my vision was sharp enough now to line up a shot if I moved slowly. 2 days later, I got my first piece of evidence. They were in the den, standing close, Daniel's hand resting on the small of her back. I stood quietly just outside its doorway, held my phone at waist level, and hit record. I caught him kissing her again, caught the way she whispered something that made him laugh, caught the way they looked like a couple in love. The clip was only 40 seconds long, but it was enough. Enough to make me stomach churn, enough to make me ascertain this was no random visitor. From then on, I played my role perfectly. I let Daniel guide me through rooms, let them cut my food, let him believe he couldn't walk without his arm. Meanwhile, my eyes were wide open, catching every detail he thought he couldn't see. Over the next week, I accorded them in the kitchen, their backyard, even in the library where my father's portrait hung. The same room where Daniel once swore to my father Hewald, love and protect me. I kept every file hidden in a secret folder on my phone, backed up to a cloud account hadn't know existed. Every time I add a Dana Thurclip, The fire in my chest grew hotter. And then one Saturday morning, something shifted. She arrived early, her hair still damp from a shower, wearing a fitted sweatshirt and yoke. They laughed over pancakes, while I sat reading in the corner. Daniel fed 'em bites, like he always did, but when his phone buzzed, he excused himself to take the call. I seized my chance. It looked right at her, really looked, and our eyes met for the first time. Her smile faltered just for a second. Then she looked away quickly, sipping her coffee like nothing had happened. But I knew she had seen it, the truth in Magazi. Knew I could see her, and for the first time I wondered if she'd tell Daniel before I was ready to make my. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and share this video to your loved ones. And also tell them where you are watching this from in the comments. See you in my next video. Bye.